Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Desteni I Process Live Google Hangout. This week we're continuing again with the practical self-empowerment series that we have been walking for the past few months. Today we're going to be talking to Rebecca Dalmas from the East Coast of the US, and she's going to be sharing with us her experience with the journey through knowledge and information. I mean, we live in a world that presents all sorts of knowledge and information and ideas and beliefs from all different sources and mediums, and we often are bombarded with this body of information that we try to process, and often we'll use it to define ourselves or to create beliefs or ideas, and sometimes they're conflicting, and sometimes, you know, we don't know the purpose of the information, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. So Rebecca's going to share with us her journey kind of through the process of how knowledge and information was used within herself and in communication with others, and how it didn't actually support an effective communication, and how through the Desteni I process she kind of learned what it means to become clear within the knowledge and information, and how to apply it in a way that is practical and is livable. And we're just going to touch on all sorts of topics or points in relation to this. So welcome, Rebecca. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Christine.
So we're going to be talking for about 40 minutes. So if you have a Google Plus account, we definitely encourage you to participate in the discussion. If you have questions or comments or experiences you want to share, from the Google Plus account page, you just have to go to the Q&A app. If you're watching from YouTube, just click on be a part of the discussion in the video there, and that will take you to the app where you can share some comments. So definitely get those in within 40 minutes. Okay, so we're just going to start with just kind of Rebecca maybe sharing some experiences that you've had previous to finding Desteni and walking the Desteni process, and kind of where you were with knowledge and information, and kind of that process that accumulated to maybe a breaking point for you in terms of how it is that we use knowledge and information in the world.
Well, there was actually another point that we didn't touch on before. Was I came from a pretty conservative family, so I read a conservative periodical for about 3 years every single day, and I found myself actually getting very righteous about it in conversations with people, where I wanted to, again, it's like we talked about earlier, I really wanted to push the point to validate myself. You know, it was very, it was like small bits for me I wanted from people, because they were doing the same thing I was doing. You know, I would fall, but within that scenario of talking to the world and really actually becoming a behavior of righteousness more and more to prove my points, never following through, you know, really looking at the whole thing, because in that kind of associative thinking of what I've been reading and following, and I was spewing that out. After 3 years of this, I noticed that I was getting so righteous, and so I decided to go and read some things from the left perspective. And what happened was I actually found some articles that were the same articles that I was reading, but with a couple words changed. So I from one day to the next stopped reading the periodicals I was reading, and I really started to see, like in politics, how it's really a game of presenting information and just changing 2 little bits, and we race after that, and you can see it in the conversations about politics. Again, that same thing. It's like you state some small bit of information, and you feel like it's validating you, and then when you get resistance or somebody brings something up, 2 things can happen. Oh, I didn't think of that. I was so occupied with my own little bit of information. And the other thing that would happen is that other people, like a competition, other people were doing the same thing I was doing. They were bringing up a point to validate themselves, And then I felt like my point was rejected when it really wasn't being rejected, so to speak. It was just more the person doing the same thing I was doing. So then the communication was never really about sharing or really looking or investigating. It was all about validating self. And thus there was no real communication going on sometimes.
Yeah, it's just like that point of the war of minds, you know. It's like everyone kind of holds on to a point that they think is so absolute and so true, and they define themselves according to that information. And if it's not received by other people the way that we received it, there's conflict. And then often it can escalate into, you know, people bashing other people's opinions or beliefs. But it's like you said, we're all doing the same thing. We're all taking information and knowledge and formulating an idea about ourselves around it, and you know, wanting other people to validate that, you know, through communicating. But yeah, obviously we're not really then present with each other. We're not really here. We're not really hearing each other because we're so occupied with how we're using knowledge and information. So
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
it's like something that we're following. We're not, and also it's in short little associative bites. There's no, it's not even meant to be a fluid thing where you're drawing an awareness, you know, to really substantiate yourself, and that your presence can really stay within, that can withstand the test of time, so to speak. It's always within short bursts, like a shooting star of self-validation, and it ends up not being a competition instead of an investigation. And it's, you see it in the behaviors, you see it in how people can suddenly burst out with something and then withdraw, like, you know, that within themselves are going into a self-pity or in nobody understands me.
Yeah, but all of that is great cross-reference in terms of seeing, okay, who are you within that information that you're sharing? Because if someone were to share something and it's not received well by others, or say another person challenges that idea or belief, your reaction to that response indicates a lot in terms of how you're using that knowledge and information that you're sharing, and it indicates whether it's self-honest relationship, because oftentimes, like you said, we use information and ideas to form ideas and beliefs and self-definitions that we then use to just compete with each other. There's no real interaction, care. It's all about who's better than the other person, whose information is right. And it's like, how does that serve anyone or anything in this world? You know?
Yeah, I just had a funny idea. You know, you think of television and you think of the flashing short bits of information commercials. It's like, that's what a conversation is like. Everyone is just voicing their own, you know, that's like they're a little commercial, throwing out their little bits of associative information that, you know, has no grounding, and it's just ideas and a morality, and they just throw it out there, and then somebody else throws out their own. So and it's almost as though our behaviors are a bunch of running commercials.
That is so true. God, Rebecca, you explained that so well, because I can totally see that for myself. I've seen that where it's like someone says a line of like a sentence and then someone else responds, but it really doesn't have anything to do with what was just said. And it's just like this blurb of information really about the person who's talking. That is, you just hit that's just like right on spot. Yeah, it's really interesting if you really observe the way that people communicate. There is just it's like tunnel vision. It's just, we see ourselves and how we've processed information and how we perceive the world, but is that really, are we really seeing what's here? Are we really seeing reality? Are we really engaged, you know, with everything?
Do we have any real presence here, you know? So there's not really any communication. It's a kind of ignorant ignoring of the world competition.
Yeah. But really, we're only, you know, hurting ourselves. It's like we think that.
Well, you can see it in the physical behaviors too, because at the same time, there's always this little bit of rushing, and your breath is never really deep. When you're doing that, there's a kind of short breathing movement, and there's no, physically, there's no real stability. There's no really ease, you know, breath just gently going in and out. Bringing your head up into the conversation with the people, and you prepare yourself, you know, and you throw out your bit of information, and then some people will get reactive and combative, and some people will withdraw, you know, into a silent self-pity. And it's astounding because it really, there's no real conception, there's no real critiquing, and then and creative awareness being built. It's these little sound bites of information.
Yeah, there's nothing really, sorry, yeah, there's nothing really substantial to stand on, you know. It's like you're just standing on a thin layer that easily you fall through, you know. And
then another thing that I've done is then if you, like, say you go and you with a group of friends, or there's some new people, or you've gone to a party, you end up walking home, and you go home, and even with your you know, created a certain level of vocabulary that where you can understand each other, and with few words, you go home and you analyze the whole thing about who said what, and oh, they were this, and you know, it's all a big gossip fest, critiquing little tiny bits of information, and you know, then you feel good about yourself, and meanwhile, have there really been any solutions in terms of what's going on in the world? No.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like we're all just spun out into our own little information bubble, like you had said, and you know, we're just like preoccupied, and we're all just kind of distracted from each other. We're not really engaged in a way that we can come together and, you know, critique the world and what's going on in the world, and how everything in the world affects everyone else, and what we can do to change that, you know. So I suppose that's a consequence of how we've formed our relationship to knowledge and information. Do you have any other examples of consequences in terms of how we've utilized knowledge and information to just kind of only serve, I suppose, the ego and our own self-interest? Any other consequences you can see from that?
In terms of communicating with people, there was a couple things that just came up in my mind, and and then oh, I know what I wanted to say. You know, when you're in a, very often when people are in a problem situation, you know, where they really have to find some solutions, you know, like a car accident or something like that, when we use our depth perception, our natural absorbent ability, that's really quite natural to us. Human beings have a great capacity to find solutions for unexpected situations, and in those situations, very often, there's no, you know, collectively you come together to solve a problem instead of, you know, validating yourself because of the expediency of the situation. And it's incredible. I mean, these things are known that, you know, someone that never really, you know, could lift a car, you know, had great strength. But a group of people in an emergency situation, for example, can come together and really work together and find solutions and follow the steps through. So we have this great capacity to use our depth perception, see, you know, a greater degree of stuff So that is our natural ability. But when we're, you know, self-validating, using knowledge and information where there's no practical application, because often an emergency situation has a more practical application. Mm-hmm. So when we're just, you know, arguing politics or something like that, it's all up here in a mind consciousness of information, memorized information. And then the competition starts and self-validation, and it's like we ignore this great capacity that we have to really face things that are unexpected and find solutions and work together.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that, which is ultimately the point of this hangout, is we wanted to discuss how one can actually take knowledge and information and investigate it for oneself and bring it into a living application, because I think that's where that's kind of the missing link in terms of, you know, we're in the information age and with the internet. And Rebecca, you could probably even talk a little bit about the change, because I don't think growing up you had the internet and the access to information that we do have now. So I mean, even if you want to talk maybe about that change would be cool. But I think there's so much to know, and there's so much information, whether it's real or not, out there. It's like, how does one decipher what is real, and how does one take the information and make it valuable in one's life, instead of using it just as a way to keep people separated and to keep people in their own little ego bubbles of knowledge and information.
Well, yeah. One of the things is really being critical literacy. You really have to think about who wrote something, who paid for that person to write it, and you also have to be willing to look at, to understand the necessity to see multiple points of view. So when you're researching, you can't just go and read 2 or 3 articles. You're really going to have to read perspectives from many different angles to get a more complete picture of something. And one of the things I noticed, as we were talking about before, is when I was 38, I went back to school. I went to a teaching school. And a lot of the people I worked with were 19. So they were 20 years younger than I was. And they had learned to write papers and things, already having word processing things on the computer. I never had that. When I was in college, I had to type out the paper. I went back after I typed the whole thing out and found a typo error. I had to retype the whole paper. So wow. Here I was at 38 going back to school, and these 19-year-olds, they were not writing papers. They didn't write outlines and hold the thing in their head and then put it out onto a piece of paper. They were cutting and pasting pieces of information from articles. And how can this 19-year-old become a teacher in a school if she can't conceptually hold, strings of information in her head, if she couldn't scaffold the information in a way that gave her the ability to even understand the behaviors of children or what she was teaching them. It was really a shocker to me at 38, 39. I just thought, what is happening? And it's, I think it's true. I think it would be an outcome of, a mind consciousness system where it's just knowledge and information without practical application, that it almost compounds into simpler and simpler bites of information. And art in the world almost reflects this, because you think about images, there are these simplistic little circles with 2 dots for eyes and a mouth. It's as though we can't, our memories are so filled up, like computers, that we need simpler and simpler icons to represent things.
Yeah.
And that's the game of association as a mind consciousness system. It doesn't work. Knowledge and information without practical application, which means you have to investigate many perspectives to, if you're going to use what someone is saying about something to understand something, you're going to have to investigate many perspectives without judgment, without a preconceived idea, to get a picture of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can actually relate to the 19-year-olds you were talking about, because I found also when I would write papers in school, I found that it wasn't like I could take an idea for a paper and create the paper and kind of hold the whole idea as the paper within me. It was like just this paragraph, this one point is the only thing I could give my attention to. It was like I couldn't hold all the information within me. And as you were talking, I noticed it probably has a lot to do with our attention span, and we're used to this fast moving information, you know, the commercial, the 30-second commercial, the 30-minute TV series, it's like we're limiting ourselves in our how we learn and take in information. Everything is just like taken in, processed, and then disregarded. Nothing's kept within us. Nothing's really investigated or looked at or placed into a practical application or a real life example. It's just all, yeah, I could definitely relate to what you're saying there. And I hadn't noticed it when I was in school, but I could see it definitely has probably is able to relate to that. Just how information is presented now, and how we've become accustomed to just that quick information.
Another point of communication, actually being limited in a way, it took me a long time to kind of figure out how to decide the way as I could. But if we look at traditions are based on a technology at some point in time. Our traditions define us, and we can't even remember or see why we, do some things the way we do within cultures. But we've forgotten that it was a technology at one point, but we have turned it into something that binds us. So it's not a good or a bad, but it's not present here in, how we live. Like if you move from one continent to another and you bring all these traditions with you. So, in all, a mind consciousness has been happening, for eons, because same things. Running after a tradition is kind of running after an idea in the past, and that separates you from actually being present here and working with what's here. And really, we only live here. And if you're present here, you can assess what in practice will work, what in practice will really cause no harm. So
yeah, absolutely. It's that point of what's applicable and what matters, and using the information and knowledge that we have, and how we can apply it to today into our current world situation. And so that kind of bridges us into finding Desteni and the body of knowledge and information that Desteni had presented. And one of the first points I remember when coming across the material and starting to read and watch the videos was the statement, knowledge and information is useful if it's not lived. And it made so much sense to me, because I had a lot of knowledge and information about spirituality and all these different aspects of religion that I was quite interested in learning, but in no way did it support me or help me to understand how to change my life physically. It just was existing in my mind, and they were just like fantasies or ideas that I just kind of like to be entertained with. So
Yeah.
was that for you? Yeah, coming across Destiny.
One thing I really notice is that when I become knowledge and information, there's a certain rushing within me. and I breathe and I say, okay, let me ground myself here. Is that when you take into consideration what works here, what would cause no harm, what would be best for all, that there's more calmness to what you have to say, and it has more ease to it. It doesn't have that self-validating kind of rush where your breath gets short. Do you notice that?
Yeah, I noticed, I have a lot of memories growing up where it's like this point where if other people were talking about something that I had experienced or a place I had been or just something that I had information about for myself,
Right.
I was so like, I need to have an input here. I need to tell you about my experience with what you're talking about. I have an input of this, but it was like so self-serving in that I just wanted, it was kind of like, look at me, I can relate to what you're talking about, you know, and it was like this anxiety rushed kind of, I need to say something about what you're talking about, you know?
a little soundbite of information, and yeah. So within communication, when I slow down, and for a long time, without realizing that everybody was doing the same thing I was doing with that rushing thing, if I didn't hear what I wanted to hear, I didn't get the response that I wanted to get, I got judgmental and combative. Slow down, assess what's been said, not react to it, and just try to process it within what's best for all. Within, I suppose for myself, what helps me is, okay, what would substantiate a presence in a way that was so grounded it could withstand the test of time, like it was something in tune, that would stay clear. It's a music person thinking, but yeah, that seems to help me. It's like you have to really listen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because if you're not, I find even with the Hangouts, I've done quite a few now, and it's that point of, if you're not present, if you're not here, you're not hearing what people are saying, and you have no then ability to interact because you have no idea what was just said, so you're like, oh, yeah. Where are we in the conversation? So yeah, you have to listen to yourself and to other people, and it's that point of being present and physical in the moment, and I am here and I am engaged, without, yeah, it's cool practice actually. If anyone is looking for support, do a vlog or do a hangout. Come and have a hangout with us, because you'll find if someone's speaking and you're not present, you're in your mind, there's some thoughts going on, and it's really distinguishable. You can tell, and then the consequence is direct. You have no way of, allowing the conversation to be continual.
Yeah, and it's cool because that point of what is best for all, which is like being in tune, which is considering all things and ensuring that no harm is done, you realize you can do things like, well, let me rephrase that. Well, wait a minute, let me look at that again, because it's not just about you. It's not about self-validation. It's about really respecting everything that's here and realizing that the value is life, and that rushing, I suppose, that rushing is not worth it, that the self-validating is really it really doesn't have the value, and it's such a roller coaster. It's
Yeah, absolutely.
definitely a roller coaster. So it is a sense, I suppose that ease is kind of a stability that ultimately is more fulfilling than being up here in your head and constantly following, you know, that idea that's like that metaphysical carrot on a string.
Mm-hmm.
So I do notice that more and more. So I pay a lot of attention to what's going on in my body. And if I feel like, you know, stuff is building up in my solar plexus or there's some tension somewhere, I really, even if I'm talking to someone, I still, and it takes some time, I have to forgive myself if I miss some information because I'm like trying to center myself and forgive myself, and I just relax, and because it's not really worth it to speak or to communicate, or for instance to worry about missing some information and saying, oh, you know, I can go and investigate this myself, because what's important is really to just stabilize myself. Because it's not, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, you can finish.
I was saying it's not really a competition with other people. It's, you know, what's the term I wanted to use? When you, because ultimately you stand as yourself and you practice doing that, and you realize it's going to take time. And yeah.
So how did you initially, you know, starting to walk your process and utilize certain principles, how did you start to change that way you assessed information? Like you had mentioned earlier that it's important to check multiple sources. You know, I've heard that too in school. I was taught to read the same news article from different news outlets to get a more realistic picture of the news article. But what are some other ways that you changed kind of how you started to look at knowledge and information and process it? And how did that change once you started walking your process? Because I know, like for me, it's been a process even still where I'll read a book or I'll see something online and it's like one little line of information and I'll absolutely trust it, and I have no idea where it came from, you know, who created it, and often it just is to serve, you know, an idea I would like to have about myself, and maybe even in an attempt to apply the knowledge and information, I'll hear another bit of information that conflicts with it, and then I'm in conflict because I want to trust both of these sources, but they're in conflict with each other. So then, you know, for myself, I realized that I definitely have to learn how to investigate that information for myself, make sure that I'm not using it to fulfill an idea about myself or some picture I have of myself in the future that I want to present to other people, and make sure that I'm trusting myself as a source of how I can live information rather than just use it and trust it. And
I would say, and I've actually done this, I've had the same problem, and also, you know, and sometimes ignored something that was conflicting. And that's when you have to slow down and realize you have an agenda. You already have a set idea, a set end game that you're working towards, and what you're really doing is trying to build an argument around a belief. And here you come across conflicting information, and what I've found, especially transitioning at times, is I have to really work to change myself within to accept the opposing thing, and then, you know, that catch-22, to move through it, to find find something that, you know, sees the conflicting sides of the coin of the information, and that takes a lot of slowing way down. And it's like, if you learn something incorrectly, it takes longer to correct it than if you had learned it in the first place, which is the principle of prevention is the best cure. So in those instances, they're actually a gift, because you have to deal with these opposing things, which means you're going to have to slow way down and and take that presence and put it into those opposing forms and come up with something new. And we actually don't really have much practice in doing that. So that takes a lot of focus, a lot of repetition, going over it again and again, and using that ability to, you know, look at things from different angles. That's like using the mind in a positive way, and reforming. And I can say that, you know, you're racing along with not realizing that you're really trying to substantiate a set agenda, and it's just been interrupted. So then you have to start all over again. I've done that, actually, writing a paper and, you know, collecting all this stuff and having this idea, and I keep running into things that are conflicting, and I'm having to change the whole thing, and I don't want to, because I want to get it done and hand it in.
It's a good cross-reference for oneself to know kind of where you are with that information. You know, how are you using it, and if you're able to just change. I mean, because if different information comes up, that's new information to assess and to work with, and it can change, and it can change your direction with something. And so that willingness to kind of be open with what's here and using what's here as the information changes, you know, that I think is also something that I found for myself, and I'm sure you have. We get practice with incorporating, you know, certain Destiny principles.
Yeah. So actually the transformation of the conflict is not really that difficult. It's changing behavior and slowing down and not getting frustrated and assessing it, and oh God, I was just going to think of this word. Using what is your actual real natural ability, which is to be fluid and to transform. Because, you know, as I said before, in those emergency type situations where humans can come up with solutions very quickly when they're not acting in self-interest, that is actually our natural state. And when we go into resistance to conflicting, it's a red flag that is showing us that we have an agenda and we need to investigate some more. And it's worth it to investigate, because then you come up with a solution that you can really stand as, and you won't forget it. So it's really strong.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool point too that I've noticed. I can tell where I'm at with the information, whether it's actually here or if I'm just using it as a point of knowledge and information in my mind, is I can express it, I can explain it where people can hear what I'm saying. If I'm using just knowledge and information within the mind, it's like this kind of
battle.
Yeah, and it doesn't come out easily, and it doesn't make much sense, and you kind of like, it's kind of like this, and it's kind of like this, and it's like a real roundabout way of saying something that you can just tell you don't have a real substantial understanding of what you're saying. So then it's just stop at that point and reassess, you know?
Yeah, I notice sometimes too, when I get into situations like that, I start spiraling.
Yeah.
I get really confused, and I'm like, wait, just stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you do have that ability to just stop, take a breath, you know.
Yeah.
So how have you how has your experience or how has your life been empowered, or how have you empowered yourself with this kind of change in terms of how you've been able to use knowledge and information? How have you found empowerment within it?
One of the most recent things that has happened to me is in some ways I was thinking, what's the magic words? But it's not so much what words you're using in some level, it's how you're using the words. Mm-hmm. And I also noticed that when I'm saying something that is, and in a self-honest way, that it's almost as though people hear it. They get quiet. And that's really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's a more like direct, real-time feedback for what is being shared.
Yeah. And then, sometimes it's actually an interesting thing, and I don't know, maybe I'm not staying stable, but sometimes I think it almost invites people to want to communicate too. Mm-hmm. And they'll jump in and they'll start communicating, and then you remain silent, and you actually, I think because we mimic in a way, they start saying things, and all of a sudden they start getting into these loops. That's kind of interesting, but that has to clear up. But as far as communication goes, I do notice it, and I notice it more and more, that if you say something, because your starting point really is to do what is best for all, is to not create conflict. People do stop and listen. They do, almost like a child. Their mouth will hang open, and they'll get kind of, it's like they're looking around inside themselves, and kind of like, wow.
Yeah.
So
it's almost like you being present in the moment and speaking from that kind of space within yourself. You ground other people, and you kind of bring them, present with you. And I found even too, when people are more receptive to what I'm saying, it's because, exactly like you said, I'm coming from a clear starting point. Whereas oftentimes if I'm just coming from knowledge and information, wanting to prove a point or wanting to present a certain image of myself based on this knowledge and information, it's like you're like already in a point of defense. You already are coming at them with a wall, and people probably on some level can pick up on that. And if you're just like dropping all your guards, dropping all your ego, just like in the moment and willing to express yourself, then yeah, people are going to be a lot more receptive to that.
There's more laughter too, I notice.
Oh yeah.
Laugh more. And yeah, when you're just throwing something out there in self-validation, it just kind of falls flat. It's there in a second and it's gone. It's like the commercials flashing by. It's just, yeah, that's really nice too. But I do notice with communication, and we touched on this before, that communication is as much expressing yourself as it is listening. Mm-hmm. So in slowing down, what I notice is that I can listen to people and hold their information, even with its conflicts, and assess it, and even, process it, and as and it's okay to speak it out loud, as though I'm processing it out loud, and I'm going through the process of looking at the conflicting points without any blame, and moving into solution, and then reward. And that's okay. And I find that's really kind of fun in a way, because it's almost in the moment, playing with what's here, with what's been created, and reforming it and directing it. And it's not, I find it's easier to do it when I do it to ground myself. It's not about, because there have been a couple times when I did it to try to make a point, to make somebody understand something, and then there was just a little bit of that rushingness in there, and it sometimes falls flat and didn't work. And then there were other times when I started to do that to prove a point, and I could pull myself back and move through it because it takes practice. Mm-hmm. And then there were other times when it just naturally came up. So I find that when you really listen, you actually are developing that ability. You're bringing yourself back to that natural ability to ground yourself here and assess things in a critical way without judgment. And then you're more creative. And when you're more creative, you actually have more fun, and people relax, and there's more laughter, and it's fun. You become what people can do so well, which is our natural ability.
Yeah, it's not, everything is not so serious. You know, there's not always need for drama or conflict, or, you know, we can enjoy each other.
Then there's more intimacy and trust in the communication. Definitely.
So we've reached our 40-minute mark. We've passed that. So let's just finish up with just any suggestion that you would have for anyone that kind of finds themselves consumed or completely overwhelmed by all the streams of knowledge and information that one can find even just on the internet. How, you know, what can you say to them in terms of processing the information that is out there, and how to assess it, and how to find a grounding? What would you say?
I would say that things, and realize they don't have to define you. That what you're looking at is a perspective, and take that which is good from it, you know, and realize that information that you're reading or being manipulated to, you can really look at, assess it, form ideas about it that can change in the next moment. So not to be so serious about what you read, and create from it, transform it, slow down and practice looking at opposing things that don't resonate with you or aren't easy to take in. Slow down and really look at them maybe 4 or 5 or 6 times to really understand the form of it and not fear it defining you.
Excellent, yeah.
That you can change.
Yeah, and I would say anyone who wants practice with this, there's so much knowledge and information existing just within our own minds. And the DIP Light course, which is a free course that Desteni offers, is a day-by-day practice, basically, of learning how to process through a lot of information, and it's coming from ourselves. So that in itself is very valuable, because you're learning how to you know, look at things critically within yourself, and you're seeing kind of all the information you've stored throughout a lifetime that has so much influence in how you experience and direct your life. So I would say check out the Desteni I Process Light course for practice on how to move through information without letting it define you, or taking things personally, or using against other people, but just learning how to work with information and process that information. So definitely check that out. And then Anna will be back with our next Desteni I Process Live Google Hangout. And then Friday, of course, is the Desteni Movie Hangout. So yeah, Rebecca, any last words from you? Anything else, Rebecca, from you?
You went out there for a while. Yeah, the DIP course is really great because you start breaking down how you're informed and looking at it and transforming it and moving it and changing, and then that opens up your whole ability to assess information with less difficulty. It's really cool.
So we'll leave a link for that for anyone interested in the description box. Otherwise, we had one comment from Jason Rubio. He says, salute. Salute. Thank you, Jason, for watching and for joining us. And thank you, everyone else, for watching and joining us. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks, Rebecca. Bye-bye.
Bye.